what does leadership mean to me? What does it look like on me, right? I'm at a stage now where I don't need to prove myself anymore. My previous approach was go in with your elbows up and just kind of plow through. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to do that. Nobody likes a difficult discussion. I hate difficult discussions. The problem is sometimes when you don't give that feedback or you don't make those difficult decisions, you're actually harming the other person even more because you're keeping them in a place where they're not going to be successful.
What I take from this conversation is a reminder that leadership is very rarely about certainty or about just knowing all the answers. It's about making sure that those decisions you make align with values, sticking to your values of being human and doing your best job. Welcome to the Leading Yourself podcast with me, Kenna Iguana. Thank you for joining me. Leadership is often discussed in terms of how we lead others, but the most demanding leadership work happens earlier and much more quietly in how we lead ourselves, our values, our decisions, and our responses under pressure. This podcast explores self-leadership as a learnable, reflective discipline, not performance or position, but the inner work that sustains wise and courageous leadership over time. Each episode asks, how do your values shape your leadership when no one else is watching? If you are serious about leading well, it begins with leading yourself. My guest in this episode is Anna Coatsworth. Anna joins us from Canada. Anna is Chief Financial and Strategy Officer at Array Marketing, a leading global provider of retail merchandising solutions with offices and manufacturing facilities across the Americas, Europe, and Asia. What matters here is not just the title, but what Anna's leadership journey reveals about leading oneself when responsibility is real and stakes are high. Anna, thank you for joining me. And please, could you say a bit more about your organization and what your role entails?
Hi, Kenny. It's great to be here with you. Thanks for having me. So Array Marketing, as you said, is a global leader in the visual merchandising space. We supply visual merchandising primarily to beauty companies. So, we would sell merchandising for L'Oreal brands that sits in different retail environments across the globe. It's one of these sort of niche markets that nobody thinks about until you talk to me and I explain it to you. And then you go, yeah, it makes sense that somebody would do that. We've got about 2,000 employees. As you said, we have manufacturing facilities across Canada that supplies the Americas. We've got a large presence in Poland, the UK, and then some smaller offices in France and Germany that service the European market. And then we've got a strategic supply chain team that sits in Asia Pacific that supplies product both to North America and to the European markets, but also within the Asia Pacific market. So, I would say we're a large mid-size or a large small business. Right? When you look at the grand scheme of it, we're not one of the Fortune 500, but we're large enough that we've got a lot of complexity, right? We've got a lot of people in different functions that sit across different geographies. So, you're trying to deal with different people in different roles that are used to different cultural norms and trying to kind of navigate all of that. So it's been a really interesting almost 3 years there so far for me, and lots of learnings for me during that time.
Amazing. And what does your role as Chief Financial and Strategy Officer entail in terms of the business?
So when I joined the business in September 2023, the company was a couple of years out from a financial restructuring, and I would say still had not really found its footing. They had gone through a balance sheet restructuring, had a new set of owners that came in. One of the things that's different about what I do is I work with private equity owned businesses, right? So I've been a CFO in different businesses, always owned by private equity. There's often a professionalization aspect to it or a transformation aspect to it. So we're never really dealing with steady state businesses. And so first order priority when I came in was, first of all, building out the finance function in the business, right? To really create an operational and a strategic partner for the business, not just an accounting function, not just telling the news, but forecasting the weather and then working with business to figure out, okay, what do we need to do now to navigate this? And then the other was to figure out how do we stabilize this business financially. And so I'd say my first couple of years were very much focused on those two things. We had tremendous success in the financial stabilization. We were able to get the company financially stabilized within about a year. And then on the financial transformation side, or the financial team transformation side, that's been a journey. And I think that's where, as we start to talk about some of the leadership lessons, that's where, a lot of the people aspects have come into play quite a bit more. And happy to chat a little bit more about that. Within the last year, I've also taken on strategic responsibilities for the business. So we got the business to a place where it had really been financially stabilized and we were ready to return to growth mode. And so what we've spent the last year doing is, putting together a new strategic plan for the business, to figure out what does that next stage of growth look like? Where do we grow? How do we grow? What do we need to do within the business in order to support that? What do we need from a cultural standpoint to support that? Right? Because, all these strategic plans are great, but if you don't have the right culture within the business, you're never going to get there. That's been a much bigger part of my focus over the last year, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun working with kind of cross-functional teams in the business.
That's really good to hear. I think in this conversation, I'm particularly interested in how self-leadership shows up under pressure. So let's begin with what self-leadership means to you in practice as a senior executive leader.
It's been a journey to try and figure that out, frankly. When I started as a CFO, I was 30 years old. I probably looked like I was 16. And I was very focused on, making sure that people knew that I was competent, right? I really wanted to do a good job and demonstrate that I could actually do it. And so I was focused on the technical aspects of my job, the kind of the end deliverables of the job, and not so much how do we get there. And it's been really interesting, I would say, since I joined Array, the complexity of this organization compared to the last couple that I was in and just where we've been at as an organization has really required me to revisit that approach. I came in and sort of tried to do things the way that I had previously, which is I can work harder than anybody else, right? So give me a problem, I will work through it. I'll work countless hours. It doesn't matter. And I will drive the right results. And I realized, having made some mistakes, that just doesn't work anymore. That doesn't work in the scale of organization that we're in. I've got people who can do this work. What they need is a leader. They don't need a doer. And so that really forced me to kind of step back and go, okay, well, what does leadership mean to me? What does it look like on me? Right? I'm at a stage now where I don't need to prove myself anymore. I've proven myself, right? I'm here because I can do the job. And so I kind of take my elbows down a little bit, right? Like my previous approach was go in with your elbows up and just kind of plow through. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to do that. And I made some mistakes. I got some great coaching. I've had some great people, on my team who have helped me navigate this. And I think one of the real eye openers for me was one day I was on a call with somebody from my team and my kids came in the room and I started talking to my kids. My kids are 6 and 7 now. So at the time they probably would have been 4 and 5. And I think it was my 4-year-old that came in and I started talking to him. And then he left and this person on my team said, "It's so nice to hear what you're like as a mother." And I thought, wow, these people want to see me as a human being, right? I don't need to be a different person at work than I am at home and I am in my life. What they want to know is that I am a human being with human values.
Yeah.
And that was really, I think, a big moment for me. And so, that's really what I've tried to do is I've tried to be human with my team, right? I've tried to show that human side. I've tried to show that vulnerable side. And it's hard, right? Like on one hand, you've got to be a leader and you've got to show strength and you've got to show courage. And then on the other hand, you need to show that human vulnerable
Yeah.
side. And how do you find the mix of those two, right? What side shows up in what circumstances, I think is something that like I continue to navigate. But what I really keep coming back to is I want to make sure that my team sees my human values in the way that I conduct myself at work every day. And if I can always come back to that and ground myself in that, then I will show up better for them as a leader.
That really, touches something in me because I do think leadership from a human perspective is really, really important. So thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so just moving on a little bit, could you give an example of that moment when your value, not confidence or fear, ambition, guided that leadership decision that was quite difficult to make?
I don't know if I've had any like major decisions that I've had to make in that regard, to be honest with you. Like, I think that ultimately there's a lot of one-off decisions that we make every day, right? And that's where it's always kind of straddling like the business side and the human side. We recently did a reorganization and had to let somebody go who was somebody that I really liked. I think highly of this person as a human being. And I really struggled with it and really had to kind of challenge the team on, is this the right decision? Ultimately, I think it was the right decision for the organization. It was a difficult
Mm,
one for me as a human being. And so I don't think there was a different decision to make, but I think I
mm,
definitely think more about that human element of it now. An organization is made up of a lot of different people, right? And a lot of different personalities. And every one of those personalities contributes to our culture. And
yeah,
how we treat those people is a major part of our culture, right? And so whether it's people who are remaining in the organization or people who are exiting the organization, the way that we treat people reflects on us as an organization and
yeah.
reflects on our culture, right? And so I think we just need to be really conscious with that every day. But obviously, we still have a business to run. So sometimes you have to make difficult decisions, right, on a personal level because they're the right decisions for the business. And I think it's just kind of, again, figuring out how to treat people in a very human way, even when when you wish you didn't have to make those difficult decisions.
What would you say you learned about yourself in that moment as a leader?
Nobody likes a difficult discussion. I hate difficult discussions, right? I hate giving people difficult feedback, right? Nobody likes that and you shy away
Yeah,
from it. The problem is sometimes when you don't give that feedback or you don't make those difficult decisions, you're actually harming the other person even more because
yeah,
you're keeping them in a place where they're not going to be successful. And that's not good for them. It's not good for the organization, right? And so again, sometimes you need to make those difficult decisions and it's actually in the best interest of that person. It's going to be difficult for them in the short term, but in the long term, they'll be in a much better spot as a
yeah,
result. And so
yeah.
it's thinking about it from different angles, not just the short term, but really that long term view.
Yeah, supporting and enabling other people to excel is not always about keeping them within the organization. Sometimes it's about helping them to see that they'll be happier, they'll be more productive
Yeah.
somewhere else. That's
And
good.
I've been on the other side of that, right?
Yeah,
I've been the person that was not in the right place. And it was easier for me to stay, but I ultimately ended up leaving. And that put me into the career path that I'm in now. And I think to
yeah,
myself, my God, I'm so lucky to be in this career that I'm in now. But it would never have happened if somebody else hadn't made that decision,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
If somebody else hadn't said, you know what, this is not the right job for Anna.
Yeah, that's a word of wisdom right there. Okay, so I'd like to move on a little bit to identity and role and the role that you've got. How do you stop your leadership role from becoming your identity, especially when expectations and responsibility are high?
This is something that is a constant discussion with my therapist,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
I know that.
Work for me has been, and my career has been a huge part of my identity for a long time. And I think in some ways
Mm,
it's an easy place to go to when things aren't going well in other aspects of your life. The problem is that if that becomes your whole identity, then when things aren't going well at work, everything crumbles.
yeah,
Right. And so I've really worked hard to create different kind of pockets of my life. My kids have been a great help for this, right? Like they can't be
yeah,
ignored. they force
Nope.
you to really kind of step back and,
Absolutely.
and just leave work behind for a period of time, especially when you realize they're not going to be young forever. And this is a
Yeah.
really it's a really great time to have with them. I think just, friendships and things I enjoy doing outside of work, things that give me an escape. There was you and I obviously met we met in a course at the Harvard Business School, and there
That's
was
right.
this great article that we read as part of that course called The Corporate Athlete. And I loved this
Yeah.
article because it talked about this concept of oscillating, right? And it made the comparison to an athlete, right? Saying an athlete doesn't train 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They need rest. And if they don't get rest, they're never going to perform at their full capacity. And as professionals, our careers are far longer than the athletes, right? And we push ourselves far harder. Why is it any different? And so I really love this notion of oscillating. If you don't shut down the work side and do something else, you're not going to be able to hit your maximum performance at work. And so for me, it's, running. Running is my mental escape. It's my kids, it's my dogs, it's my family, right? Those are all the things that bring me joy and are my escape from work. And when I take that step away and then go back, I think I'm much better at my work because I've got all of those
Yeah.
other things.
Absolutely. I'm much more productive. I'm much more human as well because being human is about
Yes.
all those different experiences that we bring
Yeah.
to
Nobody
the
wants
work
a
that we
boss
do.
who just works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right?
Yeah. Nobody likes that. Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. And it's really important to say if your life revolves around one aspect, I feel that you're poorer for it
Hmm.
because you can't contribute the totality of the variety of experiences that you would otherwise encounter
Totally.
if you were to bring in different aspects of yourself. That reminds me about a book I think we also read as part of the course we did at HBS, which is the Portfolio Life. I found that quite incredible just to read it because it just reminded me of some of the things I know I'm doing already and reinforced the value of doing those things and making sure that I have different aspects to my life, whether it's at family, work, leisure, and all the different things that you kind of bring to make your life more full and much
Yeah.
more
And
meaningful.
bringing all of those passions together, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the dream.
absolutely. Yeah. That's true. Sometimes you do a bit more of one than the other,
Yes.
but I think it's just keeping all those different portfolios oscillating and moving rather than just abandoning some of
Yeah.
them and just focusing on one. So that's really important. Thank you.
Yeah. No, for
And is
sure.
there a regular practice or habit that helps you stay grounded as a leader? I mean, you talked about running, so you might be running on your dogs, but
Yeah.
is there a practice itself that or habit that you kind of identify and say, this is what keeps me grounded as a leader?
I can't point to any one thing. I think, like I said, I see a therapist every week, and it's been such an amazing practice for me. It's something I started doing a few years ago, and I don't think I would be the leader that well, I know I wouldn't be the leader that I am today without my therapist, because I think a lot of being a leader is having confidence in yourself, right? Being able to
Mm,
admit when you're
yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
Um, right? There's times when I'll go in and I'll say, like, I'm pissed off at something that's happened, pissed off at somebody at work.
Mm,
And she'll sit there and look at me and go, let's talk through this. And what I realize is I'm really pissed off at myself because I did something wrong, but it's a lot easier to
mm,
express that as anger towards somebody else.
mm,
And being able to kind of sit back and sit in your mistakes and admit those mistakes and apologize for them and recover from them is so much
mm,
it's such a big part of what makes us who we are. And to be able to have somebody in your life, whether it's a mentor, a therapist, a coach, a friend, who
mm,
can give you that honest feedback but also wants to see you be successful, I think is
mm,
so important, right? Because we're all human, we're all going to make
yeah,
mistakes. and
yeah,
and to just have people there who are always saying, "Oh, good job, you've done great," and when you get mad, who go, "Oh yeah, that other person, they're a jerk," like that doesn't really help,
yeah,
right? What you want
mm,
is people who are going to challenge you and make you do better. And so I'm really lucky. I'm also lucky. I mean, I've the team that I work with right now at Array. I'm just so incredibly lucky with the people that I
mm,
work with. My CEO, he's stepped into that role about a year ago. He was our COO previously. He and I have just have such a great partnership, and There's a real safety between us, I think, right? Where, we can make mistakes and nobody's
Yeah.
jumping on top of the other one when we do, right? We really work as partners and support each other and can be honest with each other and push each other. I think that's such a valuable
That's,
thing. So yeah, I think it's just
yeah.
having that, having those people around you and that
Yeah.
safety to fail and the ability to live in mistakes and recover from those is really critical.
How would you recommend for a leader who is out there thinking, okay, well, I have friends in my life that do that. Is it the same as having a professional therapist or a mentor do it? Is it the same? Does it give the same value in your opinion?
I don't think so. I think it's great. I think both are great, right? It's important to have friends that you can talk to as well. But I think we are really complex as human beings. And having somebody that can really help you peel back the onion and understand
Hmm.
why you are the way you are, right? What some of your habits are, where they might come from, and how that translates into your behaviors today. I think you really need a professional for that. I'll give you an example.
Okay, go for it.
So my therapist also works with the NHL Players Association, which to me
Hmm.
is really cool because I grew up as a competitive hockey player, right?
All
So I'm
right.
like, that's a really cool job to have.
Yeah.
And so she deals with a lot of hockey players. I played a fairly high level of competitive hockey and I was a goaltender. And so she's seen all of these other goaltenders in her practice and she understands the mentality of a goalie. And
Hmm.
so one of the big learnings for me has been understanding how being a goaltender in hockey and all the practices that I've developed that made me successful doing that has impacted my approach to life
Yeah.
today and my approach to my career. And as I think about kind of that next step in my career, how do I need to change the way that I approach things, change my mentality from that of a goalie to that of a forward, for example?
Hmm.
And so I think it's just, it's not something I'd ever thought about before. But ultimately, what drove me as a goalie and how I acted as a goalie had so many parallels to how I function in my career today as a CFO, right? You think
Yeah.
about it like ultimately you're the gatekeeper, you're the
Yeah.
protector, you're the last line of defense. But you also are often kind of operating on your own. You're at the back and you're on your own. You're not needing to pass the puck up with the other players on the ice. And so as I think about my career ambitions and how I want to transition and how I want to be more of a leader, right? It's starting to think, okay, I need to get out of this goaltender mindset and be a forward
Hmm.
and think about life as a team captain, right? Where you're out there at the front of the ice and you're leading people. And it's very different. But for me, that sports analogy was so valuable to kind of understanding myself and then translating that into actions professionally.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, we've come to the end of this podcast, but I've got just one more question to ask you. I really want this podcast to help people who are thinking about their leadership. So, for someone who is listening, who is reflecting on what it means to lead well, to lead with integrity, with impact, with values, what would you want them to nurture and hold on to based on your own experience?
I think the one of the lectures we had, which really stuck with me, that we talked about our values, right? And how your ability to influence comes down to being able to communicate your values to people.
Yeah.
And it's not communicating them in words, but it's communicating them in how you act. And that to me was something I thought a lot about because I think it's
Mm.
important that we know for ourselves what those values are that we want to communicate and we think about how they come across. And I think, again, that is a journey. It's a journey, but constantly reflecting on like, who am I as a human being? What are the values that I have? And how do I communicate those to the people that I'm leading? I think if you can do that, you can't go wrong.
That's really good advice, and I hope somebody out there is listening to this and really taking it to heart. Anna, thank you so much. A huge thank you for agreeing to do this podcast. I'm sure you've helped somebody out there who is thinking about it. The next step in leadership or how to navigate that challenge in their leadership and how they can bring their values to bear on the decisions that they need to make. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. So, for those of you listening, what I take from this conversation is a reminder that leadership is very rarely about certainty, or about just knowing all the answers. It's about being aligned with your values and making sure that those decisions you make are aligned with those values and sticking to your values of being human and doing your best job. Leading yourself is not automatic. It is intentional and it gets better with practice. So choose alignment over drift. Choose disciplined growth over easy comfort. When you strengthen the leader, you strengthen the culture. And stronger cultures deliver better and more impactful outcomes. If this episode has been valuable, please share it with someone who cares about leading well and consider leaving a review or a comment. Until next time, lead yourself well and lead well. Goodbye.